You need to decide how to live your life right now, like today, not in some abstract future when you have more information or more wisdom or more life experience. You have to make choices about what kind of person you're going to be, and those choices have consequences that ripple for decades. But here's the problem. You can't know if you're making the right choice until after you've already lived it. And by then, it's too late to go back and try the other option. And this is a fundamental crisis at the heart of human existence. And philosopher Kierkegaard spent his entire life wrestling with this problem in the most personal and brutal way possible. Kierkegaard wasn't necessarily like other philosophers in his time. He didn't write in personal academic papers about abstract principles. He wrote stories and created fictional characters and got inside their heads and made you feel what they felt. Because for Kierkegaard, philosophy wasn't about building logical systems, but about confronting the impossible situation of being a human being who has to choose how to live. In 1843, he published a book called Either or. The structure is a little strange. It's presented as a manuscript that someone found in a secret drawer of an old desk. The manuscript contains letters written by two different people, identified only as A and B. They are writing to each other about how to live. And what Kierkegaard is doing here is presenting the two options that have come down to us through thousands of years of moral philosophy. Two fundamentally different ways of being human, either this or that. Person A represents what Kierkegaard calls the aesthetic life. This is the life of the senses: art, music, beauty, food, wine, sex, love, and power. You explore everything the world has to offer and put together the most enjoyable package possible. You develop tastes and you pursue excellence and pleasure. You become a connoisseur of experience. And this sounds appealing to most people. Most of us would love to enjoy good food, good music, and meaningful relationships. Now, person A isn't just some hedonist stumbling from one cheap thrill to the next, though. He's cultivated. He loves Mozart and finer things. And he's living what looks like a rich and full life. But there is a darkness. Kierkegaard includes a section called The Diary of a Seducer. It's about a young man pursuing a woman named Cordelia. At first, he seems decent enough. But as you read, you realize that he is not just interested in her for the obvious reasons. He's interested in power. He likes to manipulate her emotions and enjoys watching how she responds when he's affectionate versus when he's distant. He's running experiments on another person, testing his ability to make her feel things. And he finds this deeply satisfying. Not the relationship, the control. And this is where the aesthetic life leads if you follow it far enough. It's not just about enjoying the pleasurable things in life. It's about treating everything, including other people, as objects for your consumption and manipulation. And at the end of it all, what do you have? A series of experiences that mean nothing beyond the actual moment. You die, and it's like you never existed. Now, person B represents the other option, the ethical life. This is the life of duty and commitment. You don't just chase whatever feels good in the moment. You make principled decisions. You commit to one person and marry that one person. You take on responsibilities, become a judge, serving your community. You live by moral standards that go beyond your own immediate pleasure. Person B writes to person A, trying to convince him that this is the better path. Because, sure, the aesthetic life has its appeals, but those pleasures are shallow and temporary. Real fulfillment comes from commitment, from building something that lasts and being a person of integrity who keeps their promises and serves something beyond themselves. Now, this does sound more appealing. Most of us would agree that being a decent person with strong commitments is better than being a manipulative pleasure seeker. The ethical life seems obviously superior. But person A has a response. He says, this all sounds incredibly boring. One person forever, a lifetime of duties and obligations, following the same moral principles year after year. Sure, maybe that works for some people. But is that really the best life possible? And how would you even know? You've never really let yourself explore the alternatives. You committed early, and now you're trapped in your own moral framework. And here is where Kierkegaard kind of leaves us hanging, because both of them have a point. The aesthetic life is ultimately empty. Going from one pleasure to the next and then dying doesn't really add up to meaning. But the ethical life is rigid and predictable. It might give you stability, but it won't necessarily make you happy or fulfilled. So you're stuck with this choice. You either live for the pleasure and end up empty, or you live for the duty and end up bored. Either way, you're sacrificing something fundamental. And you have to choose right now with the information that you currently have, because you can't test both options and then decide. You can't live for the aesthetic life for 20 years and then switch to the ethical life and see which one felt better. Because by the time you know, you've already lived it. You also can't just appeal to authority. Sure, lots of people have chosen one path or the other. But how do you know they made the right choice? Because maybe they are rationalizing their own decisions. Maybe they never really experienced the alternative, so they don't know what they're missing. And maybe they're lying to themselves about whether they're actually happy. Even worse is you can't even trust your own future self. If you do choose the aesthetic life, in 20 years, you'll probably tell yourself it was the right choice because you've built your entire identity around it. But the same thing is true for the ethical one. Your future self will be biased by the very choices that you're making right now. And this is the existential problem. You are thrown into existence and forced to make choices that define who you are. But you have to make those choices before you even have enough information to make them well. And you can't get the information without making the choice first. Some people respond to this by just drifting. They don't really choose one path or the other. They half-heartedly pursue some pleasures while also half-heartedly maintaining some commitments. They end up with neither the intensity of the aesthetic life nor the meaning of the ethical one. They get the worst of both worlds. Other people freeze. They recognize that both options have serious problems and become paralyzed. They spend years analyzing and deliberating and never actually commit to anything, which in and of itself is a choice, just a cowardly one. Kierkegaard knew this problem personally. He was engaged to a woman named Regine Olsen, and he broke it off. And then they got back together, and he broke it off again. Everyone around him thought that this was strange, because she was lovely. He clearly cared for her. So why couldn't he commit? Well, maybe he felt unworthy. Maybe he had done things in his past that made him feel like he could not be the kind of husband that she deserves. Or maybe he was torn between the aesthetic and the ethical life and couldn't bring himself to fully choose. The point is that this isn't some abstract philosophical puzzle. This is the actual situation that most of us are in right now. You can pursue your passions and risk ending up empty. Or you can commit to duties and risk ending up bored. You can try to split the difference and risk ending up nowhere. And underneath all of this is a deeper anxiety. Because what if both options are wrong? What if the whole framework is broken entirely? What if the either or choice that moral philosophy has handed down is a false dichotomy? Kierkegaard thought it was. He thought there had to be a third option, something that goes beyond both pleasure seeking and duty following, something more fundamental that requires a completely different way of thinking about what it means to be human. But to get there, you have to first sit with the impossibility of the choice that you're facing. You have to feel the dread of not knowing which path to take and confront the fact that you're going to make this decision with incomplete information, and you're going to have to live with the consequences. Because that dread and fear and the sense of being thrown into an impossible situation is what makes us human. And any philosophy that tries to make it go away by offering you clean answers and rational principles is lying to you. The aesthetic life will make you empty, and the ethical life will make you stale. But you still have to choose. And that's where Kierkegaard starts. That is the crisis. And only once you feel it, once you let it terrify you, can you start looking for something beyond the either or. Now, for the rest of the week, we're going to cover what Kierkegaard thought the third option was, and if it's something that you would choose for yourself. So, with that said, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time.